So we've got some suggestions for you. We are excited to bring these to you. This is how we would handle these objections. I'm not even gonna fluff this up. Let's go.
Nope, let's get it.
All right, here we go. Is this a sales call, John?
So this one's a good one because, again, the nuances of this one matter. If you ask, is this a sales call versus is this a cold call? So this is why it's important to write down all your objections word for word. Now, if this is a sales call, here's my John Barrows masshole approach to this one is not like, I don't know how the exact words I say are, it depends. And they usually say, excuse me. And I'll say, well, it depends. What currently you guys fit a very similar profile to some other clients that we've done some great work with. And all I'm looking for right now is about 5 to 10 minutes of somebody's time so I can have that conversation. And if there's a need, then yes, it turns into a sales call. But as of right now, I don't know. So it's kind of a little bit of a jackass like way of doing it, but it keeps the conversation going because they're almost always like when you say, I don't know, it depends. They're always going to say, what do you mean by that? And it's almost going to be contentious. But then if you show them you've done your research on the account before you've made that phone call and there's an actual reason for your call, sometimes they're more open to having that discovery.
I like that. I kind of say that depends too, but instead of the masshole way that you described, what I love that term, what I say is, do you hang up on salespeople? And then I just leave it there. If you're calling, especially if you're like calling people that lead sales teams, which is often the case, right? We're calling leaders. Yeah. If you say, do you hang up on salespeople and they manage salespeople, I think there's like this little tinge of guilt that they get. And a little laugh there kind of helps.
Well, and I think, that's an important point. Like if you can, a lot of it is about pattern interrupt and doing something that's a little different and also being a normal human being too. I mean, you don't have to be a jerk. Like when I say it depends, I'm being genuine. It's not that I'm saying, oh, I'm trying to use a trick here. It really does depend. I'm not trying to sell you anything that you don't need. But if there's a need, then I'm going to sell you something because it's going to make a difference here. And if you have that mentality, I think you can get away with that approach.
I like it. John, why don't you call me back in 6 months?
So great. Perfect. So just out of curiosity, what's going to change in 6 months? Right. And you could do that. Or what I also like to do is ask this. Hey, what are the other initiatives that you're working on right now that are taking priority over something like this? And how is that going to change over? And when do you think those are going to get off your plate so we can have a real conversation about this? Because what I'm trying to do there is get some context from you so that when I do call you back, I have something to reference. So if you're like, look, right now I'm just too buried. I'm working on XYZ projects because they're taking up way too much of my time. Well, fantastic. Great. You know what? I'll call you back in 6 months and we can have a much better conversation at that point. Now, when I call you back in 6 months, I'm going to A, do my research on you to make sure that I have a reason to reach out to you. And B, I'm going to reference what you told me 6 months ago to let you know that we've actually had a meaningful conversation. I'll probably call you 3 months later, by the way. So
I like that one. Leslie has a good one that's quick and easy. She says, I'm just curious, why?
Yep.
And I think that's a great response. It's fast. It's easy. My fast, easy response is, is that when you focus on new initiatives? And sometimes you get people that are really, they give you the brush off, right? They're like, yeah, totally. New initiatives, whatever, man. Like you're like, all right, cool. Like you were never interested in this conversation to begin with, right? But then sometimes they're like, well, it's not that. It's just that. And then they fill in the gap of what they're focused on. And I can attach my value to the things that matter. So you sort of set them up for that very human response.
That's the
John,
key.
John, is this a good time?
All this, real quick, the key to all this is getting them to continue to talk. Yeah. Because the more they talk, the more they're gonna hit you with an objection right up front. That's a real basic, lame, surface level objection. And if you can just get them talking more, 9 times out of 10, you can kind of at least unravel a little bit what their situation is, and then have a real conversation with them. Sorry, what's the next one?
No, you're fine. You're fine. And you're right. Like most of what we're saying here is about keeping the conversation going. If you can manage to keep the conversation going, it'll last as long as it needs to last. If it's 10 minutes, great. If it's half an hour and they end the call with, man, this was a really refreshing call, you did a great job. Now is not the right time, John. This is not a good time for me.
So totally get that. Most people I talk to, this is kind of the feel felt on. Totally get that. Most people I talk to don't have time immediately. When would be a good time, and what is on your plate right now that's getting in your way of having this conversation? So again, trying to understand what's going on in their world right now and lock them into a certain time. And then if they say tomorrow at 3:00, or I'm sorry, if they say next week, What you want to do is when next week, and be very specific. Actually, you got your calendar in front of you. Look, why don't we just throw something on the calendar now? This way we don't have to play chase. And by the way, those words are important. This way we don't have to play chase, letting them know you're going to chase them. And we can do this the easy way or the hard way. It's your choice.
Yeah, we could do this dance for like 10 weeks where like I
Right?
hit you all the time and you ignore me, and then I keep hitting you
Yeah.
and then you call me
Right.
annoying. We can do that. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
Or we could set it up and really have like a good conversation, right? I say we should throw something on your calendar. When they say this
Yeah.
isn't a good time, we should throw something on your calendar, and you can even follow it with what works next week.
Yep.
Are you in front of your calendar is a really magic question, because anybody that tells you no is a liar.
Usually lying. And also, there's a small nuance to this as well. That objection specifically, this also comes with a preemptive strike. So when you are cold calling, if you're getting this isn't a good time all the time, then start your call with that. Hey, James, I know I probably didn't catch you at a great time. Do you got 30 seconds to tell you what, so I can tell you why I'm calling before you hang up on me? Right. So you preemptively address, it's not a good time. It's never a good time when somebody calls. That's why I hate the intro. Is this a good time? The reason the reason it's always no is because I don't know who you are, and therefore I have no idea how long this is going to take.
Right.
So if you start your intro, a lot of these objections that you get can be preempted by how you introduce yourself on the phone. Like a lot of times I'll just say, hey, James, thanks for taking my call. Can I get 30 seconds to tell you why I'm calling before you hang up on me? And that's a preemptive strike. And all I'm trying to do there is sell 30 seconds. Because if I can sell that 30 seconds and you get to agree to those 30 seconds, then in that 30 seconds, my value proposition should hopefully buy me another 2 minutes maybe to ask a question, to keep this conversation. And in those 2 minutes, that's going to buy me that discovery call.
Yeah, you're going to notice John's pattern there where he's buying more time with each response. And there's that pattern of like, make a statement and then ask a question. So here's a good one. I think people get this one a lot, especially at the enterprise level. You know what, John, this sounds great, but we do all this stuff in-house.
Perfect. There's most of the clients that we work with, as a matter of fact, do a lot of the stuff internally. Are there, on a scale of 1 to 10 of everything that you're working on as it relates to this, are you a 10 out of 10 at every level? Right. And what I'm trying to do there is if you say you're a 10 out of 10 at every level with what I'm bringing to the table for you, that's 100% of a blow off. And by the way, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I'm going to use that later, because I'm going to call you back and I'm going to say to you, you're like, yep, I'm a 10 out of 10 with everything. All right, James, look, nope, they're great, man. Look, most of our clients aren't a 10 out of 10 with everything. I mean, they might be 9.5s, but not 10. Good for you. Hey, would you mind if I called you back in like 3 to 6 months to see if you were still at a 10 out of 10 with that? Right? Because, and you're usually going to say, yeah, sure, fine. And then I'm going to call you in 3 months. I'm going to say, hey, James, we talked about 3 months ago. You said you were a 10 out of 10 with how you were dealing with everything internally as it relates to this. If it's even dipped to a 9, man, there's a reason for us to chat.
I really like that, because you're sort of setting it up so that you can it's like a touch that you want to know if this person just wants you to go away.
Exactly.
And when they give you the 10 out of 10, they just want you to go away.
But the beauty of that is you're going to bring it back to them and you're going to use it against them later.
Yeah.
Because when I call you 3 months, you're not going to remember that we had this conversation 3 months ago. But I'm going to say that you said you were a 10. And so nobody's ever a 10. So if I catch you in that moment of, man, I wish I had more resources, now it's like, man, maybe I'm not, and I'm going in the wrong direction, by the way. I was a 10 and now I'm 9. Now, on the other hand, if you say that and they're like, well, we're probably like a 9 or an 8. You just, okay, great. Well, just, for a few more minutes here, what would make it a 10? Well, if we had the ability to do X, Y, and Z. Well, look, that's exactly what we do. Is that worth 15 minutes so I can show you how we're working with other internal teams here and augmenting them so they can get that time back to focus on those other things that are more important to them? Man,
your responses are like so fast, and I feel like they hit the high note and then they're gone. It's really fast. And then there's this engagement part of it that comes afterwards where they have to respond to you with thought. You can't just be like, yeah, and then like brush it off. That's like a key factor in all these objection handles that we're giving you, is people have to put thought behind the answers. The one that I throw out there in this moment is there anything that you feel has been overlooked? This is their moment to tell me whether or not they're a 10 out of 10. Right. And if they are, which, a lot of times you get the brush off, what I do is I go, well, listen, this is what we do. I have a lot of resources. I want to share those with you over time. I'm going to send you some emails. I'm going to be getting in touch with you soon, but I appreciate your time today. Thanks for the quick call. And I let them go.
Yeah.
But then I drop them into this great cadence that delivers consistent value that's relevant to them. And I get a lot of thank yous. I get a lot of, this is the best thing that's hit my inbox. That just happened to me yesterday. This is the best thing that hit my inbox. If you can get someone
Nice.
saying that shit, you have really won the game.
Absolutely. You will win it eventually. You know
Eventually,
what I
yeah,
mean?
I
Like
play the long game.
they'll
John, you
eventually
know, I
tell you.
play the long game. It's hard to
That's the
ignore
key.
me, dude.
That's the key. The key is the long game. If you are trying to convince somebody in the short term and stuff it down their throat, you're going to have to do a volume game. You're going to have to make hundreds of dials and just burn through your list. But if you play the long game, you can be patient. You can find the right opportunities. You don't have to push, and people will respect it.
We got a few more minutes. I think we have a few more minutes.
Yeah.
I want to get as many of these in as we can. I really like this one because I think people get this one most often, especially when they're playing that volume game. I don't take random cold calls.
You don't take random. This isn't an interesting one. Well, this isn't random. So I'm thinking about this one on the fly here because I haven't had that one in a while. But it's well, this isn't random. And they're gonna say again, well, what are you talking about? This isn't random. No. Look, I get it. If you probably get a bunch of phone calls from people who are just ripping through lists and giving you generic elevator pitches. I'm telling you right now, there's a reason I'm calling you. And this is why it's so important to have a reason for your call. All right. For everybody out there listening right now, when you start your phone call, you have to finish this sentence. The reason for my call is, and you got to be able to finish that sentence. If not, you should not be making the phone call. And ideally, it's something based on research you've done. So therefore, it's not random. So here's a scenario, James. You say to me, John, I don't take random phone calls. James, I'm going to tell you right now, this is not random. And I'm going to dead stop on that. And it's going to force you to go, well, what do you mean? James, look, I know you probably get a bunch of phone calls from sales reps who are just giving you some generic pitch and you're on a list and half of it, 99% of it's irrelevant. The reason I'm calling you is because I was actually on your website and I noticed that you're hiring a whole bunch of SDRs right now. And we work with companies who are hiring SDRs because our training plugs right in and helps them get ramped right out of boot camp. And that's why I'm calling you. This is not random, my friend. Do you have 5 minutes for a conversation about how we do this?
So first of all, I want to make two comments. When you started that, I felt like, wow, that was aggressive. Well, let me tell you, this is not random. But then you ended with, can I tell you why this isn't random, my friend? And there was this like shift in the mind, right? Where it's, you feel like, oh, and you're taken aback, but then you hear the, my friend. Mm-hmm. And then there's this change in your demeanor. And I love that. I feel like that's a superhuman one. When you think about it, that's all we're trying to do is get people to open up, y'all. We're just trying to get them to open up. They have to drop the rapport. The one that I go to when people say I don't take calls is, well, do you guys have callers? And I leave it right there. Do you guys have callers? Mm-hmm. I have the luxury of calling sales leaders most of the time. So for me, when I say, do you have callers? The answer is almost always yes. Yep. I say, well, I'm sure you want people to take their cold calls, right? Yeah. But it's fine. If you don't like cold calls, we can set something up. Are you in front of your calendar? And I pivot there. Right. Most of the time, people will decide to pivot and at least give me some level of respect, which is all I'm asking for in that moment, right? Yep. You have callers, respect me as a caller. That's all I'm asking. Yep. John, this is one of my favorites, and I think this one goes a long way for a lot of people. John, we're all set. We're good.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to my 10 out of 10. So are you a 10 out of 10 with your existing solution in place? And again, I'm going to back down to, if it's a 9, what would make it a 10? And would that be worth 10 minutes to show you how? If it's a 10, great. Can I call you back in 3 months to see if it's still out of 10 out of 10? And then I'm going to call you in 3 months and say, you said 3 months ago that you were a 10 out of 10 with this. If it's dipped to a 9, we should have a conversation.
Again, quick, fast. You notice there's no like stuttering and there's no stammering in his response. And I think that's because when you start thinking about these types of objections in advance and you start working on them yourself, it becomes second nature to respond in the general way that you would respond. It might not be the same exact language all the time. My go-to for this one is when I hear we're all set, sometimes I think it means people would rather not talk to me. Is that what's happening here? And I just give them the chance to say, yeah, I can't have this conversation right now. And I go, that's cool. I'll call you tomorrow. And then I hang up.
Look, we're coming up on time, but I wanted to make one point on your previous point here, which is objection handling is about being proactive versus reactive. And you have to use these techniques early on in your career so that you know how to use them later on in your career without thinking about them as a technique. The reason that most of these can fly off of my tongue is because I've made 400 dials a week for the majority of my fucking career. And I practiced these techniques over and over and over again until they became innate, until they became natural for me, which is why I can kind of pop and do it whenever. You got to focus. You got to pick one objection, figure out a technique, try it out a bunch of times, and see how it flows with you, and you'll figure it out along the way.
Practice makes perfect, y'all. I hope you enjoyed this. We'll see you soon. Come to the events that are upcoming. We promise that we will continue to drive value that helps you sell better. We'll see you soon, everybody.
All right, make it happen.